All right, looks like we're live. Looks like we're here. Hey, everybody. I'll introduce Lucas, who needs no introduction. Lucas, do you want to take it away? Like, you've got some cool stuff to talk about.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, good to be on with you, Mike. It's been a while since we've done a stream together, right?
I know, I'm getting jealous, like all the good streams with Fabian and stuff, and him showing off cool demos.
Yeah, I know you're always helping us in the background of these, with these streams. But good to have you in front of the camera together with me. I know you've done a couple of solo ones as well in the past few weeks.
Yeah, we have more coming up.
Yeah, Luke is the CEO and one of the co-founders here, and yeah, very very excited about all the things that we shipped earlier this year. Made a pretty big announcement regarding Vine vCluster in Docker, kind of like a kind alternative. And alongside that launch, we also announced the free tier, and we thought it would be nice to have a dedicated stream talking about this one. So yeah, excited to hop on here with you, Mike, and talk about the free tier.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, hello everybody. Free tier. So like we can do a bunch of cool stuff with free tier. There's gonna be some new videos and stuff coming out showing the different things you can do, and I've got a demo that kind of shows off something that I was showing with just enterprise previously, but great for home lab stuff, great for like POCs and small teams. Okay, can't wait to show it off and then show off a bunch more videos on like what you can do. So a lot of our content, hopefully in the next couple of months, is going to be more focused on what can I do with free tier. What can I get set up and what can I get started, and then hopefully eventually your team grows and you want enterprise, but at least you can get started and play with vCluster and figure out how it works and see what features are part of the enterprise. Plus, there's a UI. So, Lucas, you want to tell us what's part of free tier? Do we have like a listing of like what's beyond the open source that we get with free tier now?
Yeah. Let me actually share my screen and dive right in. If you can bring that up, awesome.
Yep.
So this is just the pricing page, publicly accessible at this point, so folks can check it out on vCluster.com. Obviously, we've always had the open source offering since we launched vCluster, and we've been heavily focused on building out our enterprise offering. To give you a little bit of the motivation here, I truly believe that to make open source sustainable, you have to build a successful company around it, right? And that means it's really important to build enterprise capabilities that are extending the open source offering, right? So it's really hard for an open source company compared to a traditional SaaS, right? Because you almost have to build twice as much product, right? You have to build like a really awesome open source project, and then you have to build a really awesome enterprise offering on top, right? So it's like 2x the effort. But what we've been realizing over the past 2 years or so since we've been investing in this enterprise offering is that we're building a lot of features that are valuable to large enterprises, production deployments, folks that really run vCluster at scale. But some of those features are also really, cool and valuable to use in a hobby project and in a really small team. And, it wasn't quite easy for us to, rip out a bunch of features in the enterprise and move them to open source, because again, we want to build a very sustainable open source project here. And that means building a sustainable company around it. So if we just, move everything from enterprise to open source, then we're gonna, not be able to do that. So we essentially came up with the free tier in the middle as a way to say, okay, we're gonna give a bunch of cool stuff away for free with no strings attached. The only thing you have to do is, enter your email address to get a free license key here. And that essentially unlocks this free tier with a lot of functionality. And the only thing we do is we cap it in terms of the infra size. And the infra size we picked is 64 CPUs and 32 GPUs, which actually lets you build a lot of stuff, right? Like that's a pretty decent Kubernetes cluster. If you have 32 GPUs running, you're doing some legitimate AI work here. And we try to move as many open features from the enterprise into this free tier to really extend the open source offering as much as possible. So you'll get all the new tenancy models that we have announced in 2025. That means private nodes, auto nodes in our Carpenter integration, vCluster standalone. The full spectrum of tenancy is available in this free tier. We didn't want to restrict any of that. You get the full self-service capabilities with vCluster platform, the UI, the CLI, the CRDs and controllers to manage vClusters in a declarative way with Kubernetes resources. You get advanced syncing like CRD syncing, sync patches, and a bunch of other things regarding this.
And that's a big one.
And then
That's a big one for POCs, right? Because people get to the point where they know how vCluster works, and now they're like, oh, I'm using crossplane, so I need to sync these CRDs and stuff and I need to actually like do all this extra stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. There have been so many requests to. So we had initially a feature called generic sync, which is something we just cranked out in a day or two in the very early days of vCluster. That was experimental. And when we announced CRD syncing, which is a complete rewrite and complete different feature, we put that in the enterprise tier, and we have a bunch of customers relying on that. But now we've seen asks in the open source community. Well, this other thing is experimental. You're deprecating this. Can't you also move CRD sync into open source? And again, that is difficult because we want to build. We don't want to lose a bunch of these enterprise customers that committed to this, and we're really glad that we have them, right? Like the best enterprises that are excited about vCluster are the ones that are happily engaging with us, and for them, sometimes it's even a justification to go to their boss and say, "Hey, we actually need to invest in this and buy this enterprise license." So it's really hard for us to move that in open source, but of course we can move it into the free tier, right? Because those enterprises, they need a bunch of other capabilities anyway, and they have much bigger infrastructure sizes that they're running vCluster in. But for a hobby project, for a Series A startup or so with 40 developers, right? We want to make sure this free tier is completely sufficient, and CRD syncing is a really core feature to achieve this shared platform stack that we're talking about, where you run cross-plane once, but then you have multiple different vClusters interacting with the cross-plane controllers resources. That's really not possible. And alternatively, there's also our plugin system, so people could DIY this also with writing a bunch of Golang code, right? But obviously, this is a fully fledged feature. It's enterprise proven, right? So you can get that out of the box in the free tier now. And last but not least, there's also embedded etcd as a backing store, which is a really cool feature. Traditionally, open source vCluster, you see it here on the left-hand side, you have either SQLite or you have to hook up an etcd cluster yourself. But who likes to maintain and manage an etcd cluster? Right? That's not fun. But SQLite really has a lot of limitations, right? So if you have a lot of load on this cluster, I mean, it's a single file data store. It really depends on the read-write speed of that single file that you're writing there. And if you get to a certain scale, etcd is just so much better. And then if you go beyond that, there's even better alternatives that we have in the enterprise offering, where you can move things into relational databases like RDS, or even global RDS in AWS, for example, or just a regular like MySQL or Postgres database. But embedded etcd is a nice sweet spot in the middle, where you say, I want a more scalable solution, and I want a solution that also works in HA, right? If you have a free part vCluster, right? So you get HA. But it has the etcd baked in, so you don't have to worry about maintaining and running a separate etcd cluster. I think that's one of the coolest features in the free tier. But also very, very excited for folks to get deeper into vCluster platform, use the UI, use the CLI, use the controllers, and there's a bunch of exciting things in the platform. And pretty sure you're gonna pull that up as well in the demo part, Mike.
Yep, the etcd thing's interesting too, because maybe people want to load test. And they want to load test SQLite versus, the etcd, but before they didn't have access unless they had an enterprise or a trial. Now they can go do load testing on it and see which one's better for which use case. Because sometimes all you need is SQLite if you're just doing something very simple and you don't really care. But as soon as you attach 50 users to this one vCluster, which we didn't think people were doing, and then people were doing that, it's you're going to need a little bit better of a backing store. Oh, we had a question though. Is this for 64 CPU sockets or cores?
So this is the capacity that's shown on the nodes that are accessible to vCluster, right? So that might be a little bit more complex answer than socket.
I can show that in the UI though in a minute. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the question is towards, what about vCPUs, right? If I do, threading and, essentially if Kubernetes on the particular node that your vCluster is leveraging shows hyper-threaded cores and counts them as 2, then we also count it as 2, right? But if you don't do that and it shows up as a single core, we count a single core.
Awesome.
And for GPUs, it's the same. It's a GPU device that you can see in the capacity.
asked Pioche for like the demo we're going to do like next week, hey, can you set up the template to use, the maximum that we're allowed to use on free tier? And he said, who's going to pay for that? Because it's just so much stuff. So we're going to do something much smaller than that. We're not going to use the full thing, but you could like automate a GPU cluster with that much stuff if you wanted to, which is pretty cool. All right, awesome.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go ahead and hop into the demo, or do you want to talk more about like, so what do? They get started. You have like two methods we can use it. I'm going to show off on-prem, but the first thing when you get started is going to take you to vCluster Cloud, right? So you can do it SaaS, hosted through us. Now, you still need to hook up a cluster, right? Like we're not giving you a cluster, we're just giving you the control plane and stuff hosted. But so this stuff still needs somewhere to run.
Yep. You can also hit check the docs here for other install options, right? We even have, let me go back to the vCluster docs actually.
Which is actually a benefit too, right? Because if it's a free tier hosted thing and it starts getting too expensive for me as a company and I want to get rid of it, then it goes away. But if I give you an on-prem option, you can deploy it whenever you want and just keep it forever, right? So that's another benefit of it being,
You have a bunch of options here. You can deploy us to a regular Kubernetes cluster, but now with Viant, which we just announced together with the free tier, you can also run us as a Docker container. So just imagine it like Docker run vCluster. That's not exactly the command to spin it up. You do have the CLI to spin it up with, but effectively, you create a vCluster and it deploys a Docker container, and you can see it in your Docker desktop or ORP stack, etc. And then vCluster platform is just another Docker container, right? So with two containers, I get essentially a vCluster and vCluster platform completely spun up on my local machine with just two containers, which is pretty amazing. Obviously, the traditional way to say Helm install the platform, Helm install each vCluster is also available. It doesn't really matter actually how you install it, whether you go with vCluster Cloud, right? Or whether you install it as a Docker container or on top of a cluster with a Helm install. The free tier is all the same across any of the installation options.
Benefits to each too, right? Like if you deploy it without a host name, we give you a host name. If you deploy it on the cloud, you get an external, endpoint and stuff like that. So if you're doing GitHub Actions and stuff, you have a accessible endpoint that you can use to actually run these things, an API endpoint.
That's a good call. Like even the on-prem offering, we do give you that subdomain, right, to proxy it through. It's a little bit a different subdomain than the vCluster Cloud one, but in either case, that is really, really useful. Yeah,
great for POCs. And also, I guess everyone that's going to have all these Mac Minis and stuff, they can go ahead and deploy Vind in that, right? Like in the next couple of weeks, once they're done with OpenClaw or whatever it's called right now. I think that's what it landed on.
Yeah, that's the current hype, right? The current name for the hype. I don't know. Maybe that's.
I'm too afraid to use it. I'm too afraid because it's like I grew up at a time where like I don't give my information to anybody or anything, and I'm going to give this thing all this information. It's going to go. I'm afraid what it'll do, right? Like I don't want to delete everything.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll go ahead and I'll bring up my screen and then I'll show a quick demo. And if anyone has questions, go ahead and ask some questions while we're going through this. I'm just going to show something that you can do with the free tier that previously you could only do with the enterprise tier. And then I'll kind of walk through and show like the UI a little bit. So we had a question about like, what does this see for CPUs? So if I click here, right, like this one has 4 cores, and 4 cores. So I'm at like 12 cores out of the amount that I'm able to actually use. These are just VMs. Oh, I'll zoom in a little bit.
There
you go. It doesn't get too crazy big. All right. So let me give you an idea of what my setup is. So right now I have 2 Proxmox servers. I have a Proxmox server that is going to be running my control plane. So I've got 3 virtual machines and I'm running K3S on there. This is where I'm actually going to install vCluster platform. And then I have another one that actually has GPUs. So this is PVE. This is my 3 VMs. This is running K3S. This is even like smaller. This is running K3S. And then here is my AI one with some GPUs that I'm actually going to be using as my target for my auto nodes. Now, what is auto nodes? We introduced something called private nodes, which lets you just create a virtual machine and then connect that into a vCluster. So you're not actually sharing nodes on a Kubernetes cluster. You're creating a brand new Kubernetes cluster with vCluster as like the control plane. But then we took it a step further and we added in Carpenter, which makes it so I can automate it. So the demo is kind of going to be, hey, I create an Nginx pod and I only need 1 node for that. And then I create 2 more Nginx pods that actually needs 3 different nodes because they have anti-node affinity. So they're not going to go on the same one. And that'll go ahead and actually spin up these brand new virtual machines in Proxmox. You can do it in the cloud. You can do it pretty much anywhere, right? Like right now, I'm just showing like how you can do it on-prem. The cloud stuff's easier. This one, like I had to actually kind of develop my own main.tf using the BGX Proxmox Terraform provider. But basically you can do it anywhere. So like that's the background of what we're going to do. But I'm going to show it off. It's pretty cool. I'll start by doing something very simple. Like this is the first thing you're actually going to do after you kind of log into the UI. You'll just create a virtual cluster. And then I'm just going to create like a basic virtual cluster, and I'm going to call it, basic. So this is just a basic shared virtual cluster. This is going to get deployed on my K3s node. I might be jumping around. It's might be a little bit confusing, but this actually gets deployed on the K3s cluster, which is fine because I can do multi-tenancy and stuff with that. But what I want to do is I want to take advantage of this AI cluster that's got 2 GPUs. So I'm going to go ahead and walk through what I actually did beforehand, and then I'll deploy the auto node to show you like what it looks like. So we have this concept of, if you're coming from open source, you're used to using vCluster YAML, and it's like Helm and all that. But everything in platform is a CRD. So I can actually create this thing called a template and use the vCluster YAML that I have from my open source stuff that I've created and modify it and make it so that I can deploy with this. So templates add a little bit more power to what you're creating and make it easier to manage and deploy the virtual clusters. Now you can also kind of have versioning on the templates and stuff like that, to where I can deploy a cluster and say, hey, use whatever the latest version of this template is. And then as like as an admin, I can go in, I can modify this stuff so that my users are always updated. Like I can update the version of vCluster, all that kind of stuff, different versions of K. So it's easier to keep stuff aligned with what version of things you want to use. All right, but for my auto node template, all I have to do is create a couple of things. I need a load balancer because I need to be able to talk to the vCluster. It's a private node, so I'm enabling private nodes. And then I've got this provider, which I'll show you in a moment, which is Proxmox in a node pool. Now, if you're using AWS or something like that, okay, so I got a question. So my Proxmox, so the GPU addition isn't automated because the provider that I have doesn't make it easier for me to actually pick the PCIe device. So the adding of the GPU isn't automated. The adding of the VMs and stuff is automated, but I can go in and I can manually select it and add that GPU and then install the GPU operator or something like that to actually give access to it. So, but yeah, my Proxmox is GPU enabled because I'm literally running it on a desktop with 2 1080 Ti's. And then I've got another one with a 5070 Ti. So consumer grade GPU enabled, if that kind of makes sense.
You don't have some H100s in the closet.
Or 6000 Pro or something like that, right? Like, which would be awesome. So I'm kind of limited. I'm limited to 16 gigs and then 2 12 gigs, which will let me run some, decent models that I can play around with, but not anything huge. Like the bigger stuff I'm running on my studio because I've got 32 gigs and I can use like 20 something of it. Yeah. So, but I'll show you in Proxmox where that is too in a moment. So the idea is like I can deploy this auto node. I'm kind of making it a little bit easier, right? Because I create this template, I call it auto node, I give it an image. I come down here, I go to private nodes, I've selected Proxmox. Like all this stuff on the right-hand side is CRD that I can write out in YAML, or on the left-hand side, I can go through this wizard and I can configure it. So it makes it super easy. Now, the cool thing about the UI is if I do that the first time, I can copy and just replicate this and like change it and then create it as a CRD later if I want to. So I can automate all this creation, updating, and all that stuff too. Like Kurt's got an awesome demo where he keeps all his templates in like GitHub and makes changes and pushes it, and then it gets updated here so that you're not actually managing it in the UI.
He's the templating master for sure.
Yeah, like it looks amazing. All right, so if I go to my nodes, I now have this node provider. So I also create this node provider, right? So this node provider, what it's going to do is it's going to tell me, hey, where's the configuration for this main.tf? Let me zoom in a little bit more. Is that a little bit better? Yeah. So I've got this provider. You can, so like, let's go to the creation. So like if I create another node provider, I can easily connect it to AWS, GCP, Azure, or use KubeVirt. But right now I'm using Terraform because I want to do it all on-prem, or got NVIDIA BCM2. So I have all these options to where I can create these node providers. It's easier for the cloud stuff, right? Because there's a lot more, it's a lot easier to walk through the wizard and configure that. For this, like I'm using some like third-party Terraform provider to use it. There's multiple providers you could use. I settled on this one. So if you know of a better one, let me know. All I really need to do in this is I've got a display name. I could set up infrastructure stuff to where like I'm creating VPC and roles and subnets and all that stuff. But for on-prem, since I'm just kind of demoing, I don't really care about that. But for like production, you're obviously going to use that instead. I can template out my Kubernetes too. So I can tell it, what CSI drivers to use, some different specific tooling, and then GPU drivers and stuff like that. And I can even like with the AWS or Amazon, I can automatically add a GPU because that stuff's a lot easier to automate because they've got all that stuff configured. For on-prem, like I have to do a couple of custom things. So all I'm really doing here is creating a node template. So when the node template, I'm telling it, hey, I want to use this, which is going to set up my nodes, which is my main.tf. And this is my literal Proxmox provider. Some of the stuff needs to be updated because it's not, excuse me a little bit more. It's not value driven. Like some of it's hard coded, but it can be value driven. Like I did this very early on when we first put it out, but now a lot of stuff's like value driven to where I can put values in here and I can have different sections where I say, hey, this is my endpoint and update it. So I'm not putting this out publicly. So All this is on-prem and local, so it doesn't really matter that much. But I'm just telling it, hey, this is where my endpoint is. I'm saying insecure because I don't have a cert in front of it. Use the SSH agent to connect in. I need to tell it where my data store is, what the node name is. Everything in there is like named AI for me. And then I need user data. So this kind of brings in some of the cloud init stuff. If you're used to doing VMs, you're just going to tell it like, hey, configure some of these things. Like, so I could add SSH keys and stuff, but on this one, since it's a demo, I'm just putting in a password. You don't want to do passwords. You want to turn password off, and then use like keys and stuff if you can. But for simplicity, I'm just setting this up, and you can set that stuff all up here too, right? It's just going to run cloud init. It's going to mount something in Proxmox that gives it the user data, and then it's going to pull that stuff in, and then it's going to cloud init because I'm just using a cloud image for this too. And then I'm also telling it, hey, what to name it, which node to put it on, where the user data is. Use DHCP because I don't really care about a set IP address, although I could set stuff specific. For the cores, I'm just saying use the amount of cores that are part of the nodes that I've defined. So if I've defined something with, with 4 cores, it'll just use 4 cores. 8 cores, it'll use 8. So I can have different sizes. And then I can limit those sizes to say, hey, I can only have 3 larges or 5 larges per customer or per like tenant. And then I've got memory too, like, hey, this one, just pull the memory out of whatever my node is, trim M, because I'm just using, megabytes, and then use like 16 or use 8. And then I tell it where the disk and stuff is. And then, like I said, I'm basically, all this is doing is it's using a base Ubuntu cloud image, and then we're doing a bunch of stuff on top of it. Like we're deploying all of the stuff that you need for Kubernetes to run, and then we're checking it in afterwards. I'm just using a regular network bridge. A little bit TMI about Proxmox if you're not used to it, but this is very similar to kind of like what you're using for AWS. You're just telling it, where my VPC is, where all this other stuff is, and it'll configure that. But for the Proxmox with Terraform, I'm doing this, right? So let's go back over here. So that's kind of describing like what this repository was. I could do this all inline, or I can manage this and save it in a repository to where I can make updates there, and the updates will get pulled into this instead of doing it inline and having to modify this every time. So like if I want to change, something about it, I can do that. Like, or if I want to add more nodes, I can do that too. But then, yeah, so I've only got two types. I've got large and medium, and it's going to pull based on how large the workloads are. So if I start getting to using too much space, it'll deploy a large because it needs more space as soon as I need that. But for the most part, it's just going to deploy medium because I only do an Nginx. All right, so I've got that, and then you can validate, and then I've got my node types down here. So that's most of the setup. The only other thing that I've done is I have created, let me bring my text up and I'll show you without the passwords. I have, so it needs to know how to connect to Proxmox. It needs to know like what my username and all that stuff is. So basically what you're doing is you're creating credentials in Kubernetes. So this is going to be on the cluster where you are running vCluster platform, and it's going to create these credentials in the vCluster platform namespace. And I'm just telling it, hey, here's my Proxmox username. Here's my password. Here's my SSH password, my SSH user. Now there's multiple ways to do this. I can use the secret if I want to. I can also set it up a little bit differently to where I can access it, but I'm going to use the secret. And then what I need to do is I need to label it. Literally all I do after I create this, which I've already got it created, I'm not going to create it again, is label it. So now I'm labeling it, hey, this is the Proxmox credentials. And then I need to have this label of provider equals Proxmox. And that's how Proxmox is going to find this information, and it's going to connect to the backend. And then let's go ahead, and the actual creation is pretty quick. So I had it previously, I had all this on one node, and it took too long because I was basically killing the node because I was trying to create 3 to 4 VMs at the same time as I already had a bunch of other stuff running. So I kind of split them out so that I can kind of speed up the demos and show stuff off. But basically, now all I have to do is go in here and create an auto node. It's a demo. I've got the same specs. I've got the load balancer. I'm saying use provider Proxmox in my node pool. And then I'm creating. And then what it's going to do is it's going to come over to here, and it's going to start bringing up a node. I think when I was testing earlier, as long as the internet's not going crazy with me streaming, took about like a minute or two for it to actually come up. And then as soon as this is up, what I'll do is I'll connect to it, and then I'll create a workload to show you it auto expand and then auto drain the nodes and stuff too.
It's a cool setup you got there with Proxmox. That repo is public, right? I just checked it out.
Yeah, it's public. So it's a public repository. I need to clean it up a little bit with some of the updates we've made because we've changed a couple of things since I put it out so that we can move it into maybe like a vCluster experimental. This one was just basically to get like the demo of the video. All right, so let's show logs. All right, so what you can do to troubleshoot it is show logs here. As soon as it actually comes up, we'll get some logs. All right, let's give it a second. Might be a little bit slower because I'm on here too. Did this like 10 times before we started, so hopefully there's no issues with it coming up. All right, yeah, here we go.
I just shared out the repo in case anybody wants to take a look. It should be in the comments.
Awesome. So troubleshooting. which I had to actually ask Fabian yesterday too, because I was like, oh, what's going on? Why isn't this working? Troubleshooting, you're basically gonna be able to look through and see like a bunch of the log data and stuff in the UI. Let me go over to here and show. It's not coming up yet. All right, we'll give a second. Basically, you'll be able to see all this information over here in the UI, and it's going to show you like what's going on. So the first level of troubleshooting is going to be by hovering over this and going to show logs. And if there's any issues or anything like that, like it says can't connect to Proxmox or something, it's going to show here. Now, if everything deploys and it doesn't check in for some reason, what you're going to do is you're going to SSH to the virtual machine and then just look at the cloud init data, because all that stuff is in the cloud init. Cloud init brings it up, it gets the IP, it does all the special stuff, and then it checks it in. All right, so now it's getting started. So we should see a virtual machine come up over here, which we do. And then we're waiting for it to check in. And it's already checked in, right? That was like a minute. Let me go ahead and connect to it via the CLI. So we have a CLI for vCluster 2. We do a vCluster list. We can vCluster connect demo. And since I've got Docker running, what it's going to do is bring up a pod in the background to proxy to that for me. So I don't have to actually add a public address or something like that, or load balancer in front of it to connect to it. Now I can do that, and I can use kube config and all that, but we make it really easy with the CLI if you just want to connect, and it'll actually change the context. All right, so now I'm changing the context. Let's get some nodes. That node came up. It's ready, 36 seconds. Let's go and create something, right? So right now we're not running anything. We've got one node. Let's create this Nginx, which if we look at it, it's basically got pod affinity saying, just put it on a different node, and we want 3 of them. So let's watch the nodes come up. Swap around. All right, so we've got these nodes starting to provision. We can watch here and see when it comes up. We can actually go back over to the UI too, and we can see that it is now in a status where it's provisioning more nodes. Right now we only have 1 node, but as soon as we get those 3 things running, we'll go back to the CLI. We can watch the pod starting to come up too, right? One of the pods is already running because we've already got a node backing this Kubernetes cluster, this vCluster, right? It's a private node vCluster with the Carpenter. The Carpenter just adds the magic of scaling up and scaling down. So we can literally watch these nodes coming in real time. And what's interesting about this too is, like, say your developers and stuff are working at different times or something like that, and you just want to have like one node that's always running something, but then like they all start working off of the same one, because you can add multi-tenancy on top of this. So I can add vClusters on top of this vCluster auto node or private node, and then that'll scale up because it's still using the host node scheduling. So it's going to say, hey, I need more stuff. Let me go ahead and create more. Let me create larger VMs, like that kind of stuff. Lucas, I don't know if you want to add anything. I've just been like spewing information.
This was really awesome. This was a fast demo, though. I can tell you had to hurry up because the provisioning is pretty quick, right?
It is, yeah. It's quick now. So now that I've got this, it was slower in the beginning when I had it all on the same thing because I was running out of resources. But having it separate, and then like upgrading my network to Wi-Fi 7, and then like upgrading some of my network devices, everything. Like I did everything because like, why isn't this going faster? So I did all of that stuff just so that like I can kind of make it go faster. But now those nodes are already up, right? So 2 minutes. 2.5 minutes since we created this vCluster, we got a single node. We created something that has 3 pods running, and it created 3 more nodes. So if we get the pods right now, we can see all 3 of them are running. And then what I can do too is, I'll delete in a second, but I can delete them, and then it's going to scale back down. So I'll show that in a moment. But let me show this. I think someone asked about like GPUs. So like, what if I want to add a GPU? Like the GPU is still manual within this. Now there's probably providers out there that may make it automated. But if I go in here, I can just go to Serial, sorry. If I go in here and go to PCIe, where is it? PCIe device, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a raw device, and then I'm going to go down and I'm going to connect this like 1080 Ti. Now, I have to restart it. I have to restart it because it's not hot swappable. But as soon as I restart it, if I did this with like 2 of my nodes, since I have 2 of them, and then I install the GPU operator, I'm going to be able to run like workloads on there that are actually going to access and use those GPUs too. So it's pretty quick and easy to set those up. Now, I might want like a minimum amount of nodes, or like maybe I'll use private nodes instead of auto nodes if I'm doing that, because I don't want these nodes to get deleted if I'm not using them. So because it's a manual process to add that in for Proxmox, right? Like maybe I use private nodes instead and have that running, and then like for auto nodes, like I'm running other workloads. But if you can automate it, you can kind of add that in, just add it in, but then you're always installing the GPU operator. But what the GPU operator is going to do is, like, say I could install the GPU operator before I added these in. Like it's gonna look at those nodes and see what they're running, and then add that in as an available resource. So like if I restart that, I can add that. That's another demo. So I'll show that demo off maybe on a video in a couple. I think Piotr's going to show something like it, but I'll show that demo off again later if you actually want to see it, like how that works. But I've got these added. Let me go ahead and clean up because I'm done. So what I can do now is I can just delete this Nginx configuration. Let me look at my log, or let me look at my docs to make sure that I've covered everything I wanted to cover. While it's doing that, let's get the nodes. The nodes aren't going to go down here. It'll go down the UI. Pods are gone. And then if we go back to the UI, we should start seeing like a status that says, hey, like I'm doing stuff. And then if we give it a minute, what it's going to do is it's going to go, yep, it's doing stuff. It's going to go back down to that single node because it still needs a node. So if we click into it, let me close this. It still needs a node to run the pods and stuff that are backing this virtual cluster. So you're always going to have with the auto nodes, at least like one node running, unless you just delete it and go down to 0. But like you should always have one node running that's going to actually create, core DNS and all this other stuff that's running on the node to back it. But if we go back over to CLI, and I'm hopping around a lot, let's get nodes now. So it's deleted one, and it should delete the other. It's deleted the other. So now what we've done is we've created a bunch of VMs, automatically added them into a Kubernetes cluster based on our workloads, which is interesting for home stuff too. If you want to scale up and create something to do something really quick, or if you want to do a POC with a smaller team where they're all working off of the same vCluster and they need to create stuff, it'll scale up. But like what I would do after this is I would add probably vClusters on top of that to add multi-tenancy to the users, and I would use the shared model on top of this if I had multiple people using the same one, because then it'll scale up for me and scale down. I don't have to worry about that, especially if I'm using on-prem. That's pretty awesome. But then also like in AWS and other places, and then you can set. I'm trying to remember, where did I set? You can set the amount that you're allowed to have, like the max capacity and stuff of 5 and 5. So you're not creating on accident 100 of these nodes and then being like, how am I going to pay for this, right? Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's good to have some guardrails for that. Right?
Yeah. Otherwise, it's going to go crazy, right? Like, all right, so yeah, we're back down to one node, and that's kind of the demo of auto nodes. But the interesting thing about that is that previously was only in our enterprise, so you needed to do a free trial to play with that. Now you can literally just go do this and create a bunch of these if you wanted to, and play around with it and see like how it'll fit your use case, and see if, hey, if I'm doing stuff on print, I could also, so it's Terraform. So I'm using Proxmox, but I could also be using like a libvirt Terraform plugin or something like that if I wanted to create these things. I can do this in different ways. I don't have to use Proxmox. I can use VMware. I can use a bunch of other stuff, and even use some of the Terraform configuration that I might have been using previously to create these virtual machines. All right, so what else can I add in? There's a GitHub repository. I think you already linked that. Lucas already showed this. Like if you want to get started, go to free. What I showed off today is actually in our docs, and I started it with vCluster platform start. The command that I actually used was, I'll paste that too so you can see it without doing it. So what I did is I'm running this all local, like I said, and then I've got some local like DNS and Etsy host. And what I did is I've got a load balancer, embedded LOB and stuff running on my K3S cluster. Since it's got the ingress, and it's got, I also have Nginx ingress. Since it's got ingress, which is going away soon. Since it's got ingress and it's got a load balancer, I'm able to just run this, and it's going to create this for me. And then I just have to have somewhere on my local network to say, where does this live? But that gives me a local IP, or sorry, a local host name. By default, what it does is it creates a name.loft.host, and it gives you a publicly accessible address, which is very useful if you want to test out GitHub and stuff like that too. So you can do either one. Like I said this because I want a local, but if I was just starting out, I probably wouldn't do a local yet. I would just do vCluster platform start, and then I would get that public address so that I can interact with it. And I can actually give access to people outside of my network, the ability to log in and create and access some stuff, right? Without having to publicly, shut off, because it's gonna actually connect in, right? It'll tunnel in, right? It tunnels in, and then I'm able to actually access it. But if you don't want that, yeah, you can do it local. All right, so I did that. Let's see, is there anything else that I want to show off? Oh yeah, so it creates a I'm in the sorry. I'm still in the vCluster. So the vCluster, so I cannot see the namespace of the host cluster. So it actually has created this, right? So there's my actual ingress resource. We had a question. Is there an auto nodes provider for Docker that could create nodes for a Vin type cluster? That's an interesting question. I haven't tried anything like that.
Cool. Yeah, I don't think we have that right now. So yeah, if you have a Vine cluster running, you can connect like EC2, Proxmox, right? Whatever is possible with Terraform. But it would be really cool to have a Docker provider as well. No, we don't have that right now. I think by default it probably is not limited, but yeah, you can obviously add, if you're spinning up a Vine cluster, you can define how many nodes you want. It's pretty straightforward. I don't know if you'd have a big benefit in scaling that up and down automatically with a single node, with a single cluster, to be honest. Because I think it uses by default what's available on your Docker VM under the hood, right? I'm not sure if we're restricting it to anything.
I guess the question is, how many Mac Minis did you buy? How many Mac Minis did you buy for OpenClaw? And don't let Fabian see that too, because Fabian will probably start working on that like immediately, right? Like, let's add this whole like huge cluster of things and get it running on there.
Yeah, maybe one add to what you said earlier as well about scaling up and down. There's also a way to pause and resume a vCluster, which will obviously scale it down to 0. And then sleep mode is the automated variation of that, which is an enterprise feature. So that's a little bit of the, let me watch your kubectl requests, API server requests, and also your ingress traffic and turn it off automatically. But with just the open source and with the free tier, of course, you can also pause and resume these vClusters if you really want to scale to 0. Because as you said, Mike, there's always one node necessary. Yeah.
Well, awesome. I think that's join our community, right? Like join our community. We got slack.vcluster.com. Join us and ask some questions there. Let us know what you're like working on, or like if you've created anything with this. It'd be interesting to see what people are creating with the free tier too. But I think it's about all we're going to show today. Lucas, do you have anything else you want to plug or talk about? Are you going to be anywhere soon?
Oh, that's pretty much it. I mean, maybe some inside scoop here on the backstory. We actually started, vCluster. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but we started vCluster because we are building a PaaS, right? A platform as a service, and we're giving people namespaces under the hood effectively. And, CRDs became very popular, right? And that free tier we had in the past, people loved it. But if you want to use CRDs, they don't fit in a namespace, right? Yeah. So we're kind of wondering, do we have to create separate clusters for everybody? That sounds like really expensive, right? And vCluster actually came out of the thoughts that we had around how can we, make this available in the cheapest way possible, in the most lightweight way. And, vCluster was kind of the result of that. That PaaS obviously is not around anymore. We pivoted towards vCluster once we, kind of open sourced it and saw everybody run with it. But we're going full circle now, launching a free tier for vCluster, and pushing that out. I'm really excited to see what people are going to do with this. And yeah, in combination with Wind and the free tier, that's such a strong mix for local setups. And I'm so excited that we got this out early in this year.
Me too. All right, so I have a plug. So next Thursday we'll have a live stream too that's going to be talking about automating GPU nodes. So instead of doing it on Proxmox, we're going to do it like on Amazon, and we're going to show you how to provision a large GPU cluster for your users that will automatically expand and delete based on like how much they're actually using it. So pretty cool there. So I'll post that in the next like day or two, and then we'll get that on LinkedIn and YouTube. So we had another question. They're confused about 64 limit. Is the limit for the host cluster when having a cluster of 128 cores? We can run vCluster free on it. I think it's going to be the virtual machines are attached. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you have a private nodes vCluster, right, with the nodes joining into the vCluster with auto nodes, what Mike just showed, then obviously we're counting, all the nodes that you join into this vCluster, right? But if you're using a shared nodes vCluster, right, where the nodes come from the underlying host cluster, right? So I have an EKS cluster, or have a local Docker desktop Kubernetes or K3S cluster on my local machine, and I spin up vClusters on top of that. We are actually looking at only the nodes where you have workloads on. And we are really tracking those, every 15 minutes or so. So let's say you have a vCluster, and let's say you have a big cluster with 100 nodes, and you run a vCluster on top of that, and then you launch a pod, and that pod lands on one node, then now we're counting that node. Now you launch another pod, and it lands on a second node. As long as both of these pods are up, we're counting both of these nodes with their full capacity. But as soon as one of these pods gets killed, right, kubectl delete, right, and there's no more pods from that vCluster on a particular node, we exclude it and we don't count it anymore. So it's a very, very dynamic thing. What we actually do is, we track this over time. So vCluster platform just keeps track of it. Basically runs a kubectl get nodes in the vCluster every 15 minutes or so, and kind of captures a snapshot of how many CPUs and GPU devices are attached to all the nodes that these vClusters have access to. So it's a pretty simple mechanism. So no, it's not the entire cluster that you deploy the vCluster to. It's really just if a vCluster is using that node, right? Deploying any workload to it, or you join the node dedicated as a private node into vCluster, then obviously we also count the node.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that's all we have for today. Join us next week, and then we'll have more videos on YouTube and more stuff on LinkedIn and stuff. Follow Lucas on LinkedIn to get all the latest news, right? Like check our release page and stuff on vCluster, and I'll put some good links and stuff in this video on YouTube if you want to rewatch this to see the demo or find all the information that we talked about.
But thanks so much, Lucas. Help repo if you want to have a fancy Proxmox setup with auto nodes.
Do it better than I can. Do it better than mine, because like mine's very basic, right? Like y'all can do better than what I did on there, right? Like I was just trying to get a demo working. All right, Lucas, awesome. Thank you everybody.
Thanks everyone.
See you next time.